On the night of her 65th birthday, Marianne Bell stood beneath the warm lights of the ballroom at the Harborview Hotel, surrounded by relatives who had spent years calling her generous, dependable, and the one person everyone could count on. But when her stepson Ethan lifted his champagne glass and joked that Marianne was basically the family's private ATM, the laughter that followed felt colder than the winter rain outside. Marianne glanced toward her husband, Victor, expecting him to defend her after decades of marriage, yet he merely shrugged and murmured, "Don't take it personally, Marianne. Ethan is only joking." And something inside her quietly shifted because she suddenly understood that everyone at that table had become comfortable with a version of her that existed mainly to solve their financial problems. For years, Marianne had believed that helping people was proof that she had built a meaningful life after losing her first husband, Daniel, in a sudden accident that left her emotionally shattered and financially responsible for rebuilding everything from scratch. When she later married Victor and welcomed Ethan into her home, she paid for his technical school, helped him purchase a used truck, covered several emergency bills, and even contributed toward the launch of his landscaping company because she genuinely believed that love meant giving people opportunities they might not otherwise have, never realizing that her kindness was quietly becoming an expectation. The morning after her birthday, Marianne drove alone to a small lakeside cabin she owned outside Ravenwood, switched off her phone, opened an old metal box containing years of financial records, and began comparing every payment with the explanations Victor and Ethan had given her. What she discovered made her hands tremble. Money she believed had gone toward Ethan's business equipment had been transferred to personal accounts. Several medical emergencies had no matching hospital records, and nearly $67,000 had vanished through withdrawals and transfers that Victor had always dismissed as ordinary family expenses. Instead of confronting them immediately, Marianne contacted a retired financial investigator named Caleb Rhodes, who agreed to examine the records without telling anyone, and within 2 weeks, he uncovered something even more disturbing. Victor had been discussing Marianne's property, investments, and retirement accounts with Ethan as though those assets already belonged to them. One message read, "Once she slows down, we can move everything under the family trust." And another suggested convincing Marianne that she was becoming forgetful, so she would voluntarily hand Victor control of her finances before she realized what was happening. Marianne returned home carrying a folder of evidence and calmly asked Victor why he had been discussing her estate without her knowledge. But instead of answering, he became furious and accused her of spying on her own family, insisting that everything he had done was simply preparation for their future together. Then Ethan appeared in the doorway and said, "You always said we were family, Marianne, so why are you acting like a stranger now?" And Marianne looked directly at him before replying, "Because family asks permission before taking what isn't theirs." The confrontation became even more complicated when Marianne discovered that Ethan had been told a completely different story, because Victor had convinced him that Marianne planned to leave the entire family fortune to charity, and that Ethan needed to secure his future before she changed her will. When Marianne showed Ethan the financial records, his anger slowly turned into confusion, and after several painful minutes, he admitted that his father had repeatedly asked him to sign documents he barely understood, claiming they were necessary to protect the family business. That revelation gave Marianne enough courage to investigate Victor's past, and she contacted his former business partner, Samuel Price, who reluctantly admitted that Victor had followed the same pattern years earlier, borrowing money from people with promises of repayment before blaming those relationships when his businesses failed. Samuel even produced an old letter in which Victor described Marianne as financially secure, trusting, and easy to persuade. And reading those words was more painful than any insult, because Marianne finally realized that what she had mistaken for affection had partly been a carefully calculated opportunity. Victor sensed that his control was slipping and suddenly transformed into the loving husband Marianne had always wanted, bringing flowers to her office, cooking dinner, apologizing for every argument, and promising that Ethan had simply misunderstood everything. But when he placed a stack of refinancing documents on the kitchen counter and asked Marianne to use her lakeside property as collateral for his failing company, the performance finally ended. She pushed the papers back toward him and said, "If you loved me, you would never ask me to risk my future to protect a secret you created." And Victor's face hardened before he muttered that she would regret destroying her own family. Instead of retreating, Marianne met with an attorney, froze the accounts that could be protected, changed her estate documents, and began the legal process of separating her finances from Victor's, while Ethan gradually stopped defending his father after discovering additional messages that proved he had been manipulated. The final turning point came at a community business conference where Victor was scheduled to receive an award for his supposed success. Because rather than publicly humiliating him, Marianne simply submitted documented evidence of the financial irregularities to the organization beforehand. And when the committee investigated, his carefully polished reputation collapsed without Marianne needing to say a single cruel word. Months later, Victor's company was dissolved. The disputed funds became part of a legal settlement, and Marianne recovered enough money to rebuild the savings she had nearly lost, while Ethan found work on his own, enrolled in evening classes, and eventually apologized for treating Marianne like a source of money instead of a human being. Marianne never pretended that the betrayal had not happened, but she allowed herself to forgive Ethan after seeing genuine change, and she moved into her lakeside cabin permanently, where she planted a garden beside the porch and discovered that peace could feel far richer than the approval she had spent years chasing. Looking back, Marianne realized that her greatest mistake had never been generosity itself, because helping people had always been one of the most beautiful parts of her character. But she had confused being needed with being loved and allowed guilt to convince her that saying no made her selfish. Now, whenever someone asks her for money, she smiles and says, "I can care about you without financing you," because she finally understands that real love survives boundaries, genuine family respects independence, and protecting your future is not betrayal. It is self-respect. Please subscribe to our channel and share this video with your friends and family. We create entertaining and inspiring stories for our viewers, and your support helps us continue making great content for you.